Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our special show on COVID-19. Now, in this particular show, we have brought you details of various technological interventions as well as various steps which have been taken to go ahead and fight the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the main important aspects which is being talked about and which everybody is looking up to is the convalescent plasma therapy, the work on which has begun. And we'll talk about that today. We have with us two important guests. One is Dr. Randeep Guleria. He's the director of AIMS and a member of the Empowered Committee, which is looking into all these aspects. We also have with us Dr. Anup Agarwal. He's the consultant with the ICMR and he's looking after the protocols for clinical protocols and various other aspects of this particular therapy. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, both of you. Let me begin with you, Dr. Guleria, and let's first try and understand from a layman's perspective, for a common man, what exactly is plasma therapy?
So plasma therapy or convalescent plasma is a form of treatment which is really not new. It's been there for many, many years. And more recently, it was even tried for patients during the Ebola outbreak. If you look at individual who has COVID-19 infection, he becomes all right on his own. And that happens because his body itself produces certain antibodies which fight the virus and is able to then defeat the virus, and thereby this person becomes all right. These antibodies then stay on in his blood for quite some time, and these are able to fight the virus if needed. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have a person who has totally recovered, and we take his blood, and from his blood we take the plasma which has these antibodies in good amount, and we give it to another patient who is suffering from COVID-19, then they will augment his own healing mechanism or defense mechanism, and thereby be able to really help in fighting the virus in that person who's currently suffering from COVID-19 and is very sick. So you could take antibodies from a healed person from the plasma and give it to a person who's very sick, and thereby be able to show that he may benefit. There are some studies, limited studies, which have come to studies with small number of patients, 5 and 10 patients, which have shown that by giving convalescent plasma in COVID-19 in very sick patients, they've been able to show significant improvement. Patients have come off the ventilators and some have been able to go home. So this is a form of therapy which is emerging. However, the crucial step here is that you should have people who have recovered, who have antibodies in their blood, and who are willing to donate blood so that other lives can be saved.
Okay. How different is this, Dr. Guleria, from vaccination? Because there is a bit of confusion here that plasma therapy and vaccination, they fall in the same category of treatment, but that's not the case here, right?
So plasma therapy or convalescent plasma is for sick patients. It's for patients who are already sick, quite sick, who are requiring high dose, high flow oxygen or on a ventilator. Vaccination is a preventive strategy which is given to usually as a treatment for people who are otherwise asymptomatic but may get the infection later on, and you want to produce antibodies or immune response in them for subsequent infections. So that is a body's response which takes some time. The immunity takes some time in the body to develop after the vaccination. The plasma therapy is something which you're trying to do immediately in terms of giving antibodies from another person straight away. Vaccine is trying to get the person to produce his own immune response over a period of time.
Okay, we'll understand, one more aspect of it, since you spoke about what is plasma therapy, how it is different from vaccine. So if we look at the present situation right now, specifically the COVID-19 pandemic and this particular disease, how does plasma therapy work here?
So something that we've already started at AIMS, that we've started talking to those patients who have become all right and who are now going home, and 14 days after they've become all right and gone home, we ask them if they're willing to give their blood. If they're willing to donate blood, we collect their blood. We see whether it has good amount of antibodies. We extract the plasma and we keep it. And then in our ICU, if we have patients who are very sick and who need plasma therapy, that is given to them as a part of treatment. So it's not a simple process. It requires multiple steps, but it's something that is doable, and it's something that AIMS has started doing in terms of having blood donation from people who have recovered from COVID-19.
Okay, it's a complex process, but something which is doable and does involve a lot of methodology as well. Let me bring in Dr. Agarwal here. Dr. Agarwal, in terms of the process itself, as Dr. Guleria was pointing out, it is complex. But what are the various guidelines? What are the protocols which are to be followed? Because those have been prescribed by the ICMR for those doctors or hospitals who are working on that. And there are several right now.
So that is a good question. Honestly, if you look at ICMR website, we write that we don't recommend plasma or convalescent plasma as a form of therapy yet. It should be tried only as part of clinical studies. Mm-hmm. While it has shown to work for the last 100 years, there are no good definite studies which say that it will work. If there is a positive study, there is always a negative study that said that it did not work. Mm-hmm. There have been studies from the Spanish flu in 1918 to mumps, measles, polio before the vaccination came. So there have been studies on it, but nothing has been very conclusive, honestly. Recently in Ebola, there were a few positive studies, but there were also a few negative studies, which means some people saw that it worked, but there were others who saw that it did not work. Similarly, in SARS, there were no good studies to say that it was working very well. On the other hand, the other condition that was similar to coronavirus or COVID was MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. In that also, there were no good studies to say that it worked. So currently, ICMR does not recommend it outside of clinical trials. It should be tried as clinical trial in a trial mode only. Mm-hmm. What we are doing is we are planning to start a multi-center, which means many hospitals in the country can participate. And then we will do a study at every hospital, which will include a certain number of patients. Half of them will get the treatment, the other half won't, and we will see whether was there any difference in outcomes in both the groups. And we will keep monitoring the outcomes data or how the patients are doing on a regular basis. If we see that convalescent plasma is definitely better than not giving convalescent plasma, then we will stop the study and go ahead with making it a therapy. But if we see that there is no benefit, then we will go on to complete the study, see whether there was a definite benefit or not. And if there was a benefit, then we will formalize it in guideline. But before that, it should be recommended only as part of studies. So we should document whatever we are doing.
Okay, now this brings me to two more questions here, Dr. Agarwal, to you specifically. You say that right now the recommendation is only to go for clinical trials. So how many institutes, medical institutes or hospitals are right now on your list or have expressed willingness to go ahead and be part of this clinical trial? That's one. And second is, how long will this study continue? It is likely to give us results in how much time?
So the first question is how many studies. So this is a long process, to be very honest, and it requires meticulous preparation. While we are rushing into it, but we are also trying to do all the due diligence. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is we asked for interest in the study, and 99 hospitals have shown interest to participate with us. While I don't think everyone will be a part of the study because it requires having an ethics committee at the hospital. It requires a certain regulations at the hospital, and not everyone will meet it. So we will finalize the list of the hospitals in the next couple of days based on the facilities available at the hospital. So that is the first question. So we are aiming to like 20 to 30 hospitals who will probably meet the criteria for being a part of the study. That said, most of the big hospitals in the country have already expressed interest, including AIIMS, PGI Chandigarh, SGPGI, JIPMER. So most of the big hospitals in the country have expressed interest. And how long will this study go? That is a very subjective question, which depends on how the epidemic will progress. If we get more and more patients, I think the study may get over very soon. If we don't get many patients, the study may take. So I think the maximum will be 6 months and the minimum will be 3 months.
Okay, so the maximum will be 6 months and minimum will be 3 months. Let me go back to Dr. Guleria here. Dr. Guleria, two, three aspects which Dr. Agarwal has pointed out. One is that as of now, it is only looked at in terms of clinical trials. Obviously, we will have to go ahead and see what the benefits are. And two, the time which it takes and the process which the entire process, the time which it takes and the kind of situation we are in right now, is it sort of the situation that we need to rush through the things, ensure that all protocols are taken care of, but we can go ahead and administer it if found successful easily as soon as possible?
So first of all, it's important to remember that currently we don't have a definite treatment as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And therefore, we're looking at multiple forms of therapy, which include different drugs, different other mechanisms, which may be immune-based, anti-cytokine-based, or could be convalescent plasma. But it still is something which is focusing on getting the right answer by doing some good quality research. If we rush through this but don't do it in a proper manner, we may not be able to get a good answer, and it would cause problems later on if we start accepting this as a form of treatment, but without good data that this is effective. Therefore, while we need to rush things and get things going in terms of treatment, because we don't have a treatment and there are people who are dying because of COVID-19, we also need to be sure that if we do something in a very rash manner, we may cause more harm than good in the long run, because the therapy may not be as effective as we may try to show because of a poorly designed study. And this may cause problems in the long run. So although this therapy shows promise and has been used for many, many decades in different diseases, we need to show how effective is it as far as COVID-19 is concerned, what is the right protocol to follow, and which is the right patient in whom we should give this, and then develop a treatment strategy, a protocol which we can say confidently is actually effective, it works, and what is the percentage of success that we can get with this form of therapy. So I think we need to do this quickly. It's also important to remember that we have to do it while the pandemic is on. There's no point being able to do a study and we get all the results after the pandemic is over and we don't have any patients to give it to. Therefore, it's something we have to do quickly and in a manner which is trying to sort of build a ship while we're sailing. So it's something like that, and we need to keep doing that as soon as possible. But I do agree that we have to have good scientific rigor.
Okay. Now, this is one more aspect here, Dr. Guleria, since you've had must have had experience with clinical trials earlier as well. And as both of you are pointing out, this is indeed a complex process. So in terms of going ahead with the clinical trials, what are various aspects which need to be kept into, very, very important aspects which need to be looked into while conducting this clinical trial, and also the time factor we need to manage, as you point out?
So one, of course, is that all the institutes or hospitals which come into the multicentric trial have to have proper protocols, ethics, and a proper mechanism which is standardized so that everyone follows the same procedure and it's done in a manner which is properly audited and we see that it's done properly. The advantage of having multiple hospitals is that you get the data in quickly, you get more cases, and therefore you can get your results quickly. The downside is that you have to have a very good control, because the more the hospitals, the higher the chance that the scientific rigor may come down a little bit, because in a pandemic, everyone is keen to give some sort of a therapy to their sick patients, even if they don't meet the study criteria. And sometimes that can create a problem. So I think we need to balance both things, and we should have institutes or hospitals which are responsible and who have a good number of cases. Also, like I said in the beginning, we need to develop a strategy of getting people who have recovered from COVID-19 to come voluntarily and donate their blood so that we have enough convalescent plasma that we can give to these patients who need it. So that is also part of what we need to do. And of course, the whole mechanism of conducting the study properly, monitoring it, seeing that this therapy works, looking at the endpoints is something that we need to do.
Okay, Dr. Agarwal, are these aspects the one which are in focus when we talk about the protocols for clinical trial, as you were pointing out earlier? Because as you're saying, there is a pool of hospitals which you are looking at, but as pointed out by Dr. Guleria, these aspects need to be looked into. So I'm pretty sure the protocols would be taking care of that, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And in addition to that, is there anything you would like to elaborate upon on terms of protocols for clinical trial which the hospital should follow?
So there is one important aspect as far as convalescent plasma is concerned. As sir has explained earlier, that a patient forms antibodies and we expect those antibodies will work when we give the convalescent plasma.
Mm-hmm.
So one important thing is we need to see that how much antibodies are present in the plasma of the donor. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not everyone will make equal amount of antibodies. Everyone's body is different and everyone makes different amount of antibodies in such a situation. So to measure those antibodies requires special tests. And as we know, testing has been very difficult. Currently, those tests can be done only at NIV Pune. So that is one more challenge that we are developing as we go ahead, that like how can we have more and more antibody. So this is not only, so the kits that we are distributing from ICMR right now, they give you only a positive or a negative, whether the patient has positive antibodies or negative for antibody. But what we need to do for plasma therapy is we need to find out how much antibodies are in the plasma. So for that you need special tests, and those are available only in NIV Pune right now. But as we are building capacity, we will try to build that also and make sure that in the next few weeks we have that facility in other hospitals across the country.
Okay, Dr. Guleria, in terms of two questions: how safe it is? Obviously, clinical trials are the way to go ahead and find out. But if we do a comparative analysis in terms of this kind of therapy being tried earlier in previous cases as well, perhaps in other pandemics, what are the results which we have looked at, and what does it show us in terms of the safety of convalescent plasma therapy, this entire mechanism?
So any therapy will have side effects, and this therapy also will have some degree of side effects. The side effects are not that large, but when you're giving transfusion, as happens in any transfusion, the side effects are there. It could be related to a reaction which occurs with the plasma which goes into the person. It could be related to the fluid that you're giving into the body, and therefore we need to monitor also for side effects. Any therapy that we give will have side effects, and there are some side effects which also occurs with convalescent plasma. And the protocol that is developed will also monitor to see for any side effects as we would do for any new therapy that we are giving to these individuals. So as you give plasma, you can have various type of reactions because this is a blood product which is going to an individual, and therefore that needs to be monitored for.
Okay, Dr. Agarwal. Do you agree with that aspect? Side effects. Well, obviously, both of you are doctors, so there will be. And since you're saying, and we have learned it from the previous cases also, there would be. But what's the best way to find out in terms of both side effects, its effectiveness, its safety as well?
Study is the best way to go, and as sir said, we are monitoring the side effects. Having said that, I feel plasma is usually a very safe mode of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so plasma is comparatively a safer mode of therapy. Dr. Guleria, in your initial comments, you pointed out that AIMS, that is your institute as well, is looking at this particular aspect, and you're looking at patients in those terms. So how far have you guys been able to go ahead as far as this particular therapy is concerned? Where are we right now? And in terms of timelines, as Dr. Agarwal pointed out, it might take a longer period, but what's the sooner?
So first of all, I think all centers like AIMS is doing need to really do some sort of a dry run, see how they will do everything. And as was already mentioned, one of the rate limiting steps is that when you get the plasma, how do you really see what is the degree of antibodies in that plasma? Is it sufficient to give to an individual? And that is something that we need to do. Currently, what we're doing is since we have a large number of patients who are now have recovered from COVID-19 and are going home, we are counseling them so that they would be willing to donate their blood once they become all right after, and are asymptomatic 14 days from the day of discharge, and they can come back. And we are developing mechanisms for blood donation in these individuals who have recovered and have antibodies in their blood. As the study progresses and we get more into focus, the other part will also be taken care of. As I mentioned, since this is a pandemic, we have very little time. We need to start doing things in parallel rather than in sequence. So rather than first having the entire protocol ready and then starting the study, we are doing things so that we can start everything at one point and then join everything so that time is saved. Because there's no point that we plan the study, take a few months to really fine tune it, and then start the study, because by that time the pandemic would probably have been over and we would have missed the bus, or a large number of lives would have been lost which could have been saved. So I think we need to do this simultaneously, and that is what we're trying to do right now. Do things in parallel, multiple things at the same time, so that we save time and get the study started as early as possible.
Okay, one more aspect here, Dr. Guleria, and I'd like to bring both of you, starting with you, Dr. Guleria, is the aspect of numbers here. For example, as both of you explained, the antibodies or the plasma will have to be taken from those who have recovered from this particular disease. Now, the rate of recovery is increasing gradually, but it is still not that high. And this will have to be voluntary as well. So if at all, we are successful in clinical trials and we feel that, yes, this is the therapy to go for it. One aspect which is being raised is that we might not have enough numbers.
So that is why we already started the process of counseling, because we need to have a large number of people who understand this and we have them available. But if you see the numbers, we have a large number of individuals who are asymptomatic. So our asymptomatic patients are huge as compared to those who are in the ICU. So even if we get around, I would say 15-20% of those who have recovered, willing to give their plasma or blood, we should be able to manage in terms of the number of cases. Also, currently, and I think this is a good sign, although maybe not good from the trial point of view, that the number of patients who are very sick or in the ICU is not that large. So we are currently not having that huge number of cases that has been reported in the West, that ICUs are filled with patients of COVID-19. But we don't know what the future will have, and that is why we've already started this preparation in case there is a surge of patients in the ICU and we need to look at this as a form of therapy. Currently, the number of cases is relatively less.
Okay. Dr. Agarwal, your views on that?
I agree. 85% of the cases are mild. So as they recover, we can get plasma from them, and only 15% are getting sick. So even if 15% of those 85% donate plasma, that will be a good enough number, because we should be focusing our energy more on the patients who are hospitalized, which is a very small number.
Okay. One more aspect here, Dr. Guleria, before we bring this to an end, is learning from the best practices as well. So if you look at the global scenario in vis-a-vis the convalescent plasma therapy, what is it that we learn the way it is being either tested or used elsewhere in the world?
So globally also, there are research trials which are currently being done. It's not a standard form of therapy. And whether we look at various countries, convalescent plasma is being done as part of ongoing research. This is also part of other medications or treatment strategies which are being tried, which include new drugs also. And that is also being done in India, that this is just one part of the overall research that is being done to find an effective treatment. Various drug trials are also being looked at, and various new novel treatment strategies, including things like BCG vaccine, is also being looked at. So I think convalescent plasma is one form of the entire basket of therapies which is being tried, and we are hoping that some or one of these therapy or a combination of these therapies will turn out to be very useful and will become then in due course standard of therapy or standard of care when it comes to treating patients with COVID-19.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Guleria and Dr. Agarwal as well. Dr. Guleria, as you pointed out, we'll talk about BCG vaccine as well later on in our other episodes. But meanwhile, thank you for sharing your views with us and with our viewers on the issue of convalescent plasma therapy. So as our panelists and experts pointed out, yes, this is one particular sort of way to go ahead and fight this particular pandemic. There are clinical trials which need to be conducted. The process is a bit complex, but there are innovative ideas to go ahead and do it are also being considered. Let's wait and watch as to what these researches hold for us or what these clinical trials hold for us. Meanwhile, let's continue our fight against COVID-19 in our own simple ways. And the best is to follow all the guidelines, stay home, stay safe. Keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.